Welcome to the Thriving Mayor Show, the weekly broadcast featuring former and current mayors who are thriving, sharing their story, insight, wisdom, and viewpoint. Join us and comment on social media as we meet another of the superheroes we elect to lead the rejuvenation of our towns and cities and who serve us all. Visit www.thrivingmayor.com to learn more. Here we go. Hi, everybody. It's January 6th, 2021. This is a pre-recorded session that I'm honored to be doing today with Anne Marie DeCicco, the former three-term mayor in London, Ontario. Good afternoon, Anne Marie. How are you today?
I'm well, thanks. Nice to be here, Michael.
And Happy New Year.
Yes, of course. It's hard to believe that the whole year has gone by, and a lot of us have been working at home for so long that it's 2021 now.
It certainly is. And a year that we're never going to forget, but I think we're all happy it's over and we're moving on from.
I think so.
Yeah. So a little bit of a quick introduction for Anne Marie. As I said, following 3 terms at City of London as the longest serving mayor. Anne Marie has returned to her alma mater, which is Fanshawe College, and is the executive advisor and government relations capacity. She's also a professor at Brescia College at Western in women in political life and women in civic leadership. So obviously near and dear to her heart, with a lot of experience that she can bring forward. And Brescia College, or university, is the only women's only, that's a lot of onlys, but women only university in Canada. So that's a really fantastic role. Under her leadership and tenure, London was ranked within the top 5 North American small cities of the future, which I think is really interesting. I'd love to talk about that. And as an active member of the Big City Mayors Caucus in Canada and the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Anne Marie successfully lobbied the federal government to strike a new deal for sustainable funding for cities. She also had a mayor's task force to end women abuse. Anne Marie also championed an initiative called Emerging Leaders, designed to keep London's bright young people in the community following graduation. And I know that's a major, major issue that a lot of communities, especially nowadays and with everything so virtual, are facing. And established the Mayor's Sustainable Energy Council, designed to attract new jobs in the green economy. She was awarded the FCM Roll of Honor from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities in May 2013, and the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal in June 2012 for outstanding contribution and years of service. And these are only some of the highlights from Anne Marie's CV, and a fantastic CV it is, and so honored to have you as a guest on the Thriving Mayor Show.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So I guess first and foremost, what got you into politics? Was it a family connection, something that happened in your life that sparked that passion, that interest in throwing your hat into the ring, and then obviously going for all the gusto and running for mayor?
Well, it was not a family connection. A lot of people wonder if that was in my politics in my family, but no, my parents actually immigrated to Canada from Italy, and my dad was a farmer back there, and both came from really small towns and were looking for the dream here in Canada. And so they came here, got married here, and my brothers and I were all born here. But what did get me interested in the connection back to that in some ways is that prior to being involved in politics, I was a radio reporter. I worked at, my first job was in Leamington at CHYR, the tomato capital of Canada back then. And then I moved back to London and I worked at CJBK and BX93. And in that whole, area, I started reporting down at City Hall. And that's really how I started looking at it and thinking, I'm not sure that they're doing it the way that it should be done, And when a lot of people start thinking or being, I guess they start to really wonder about the people that are making their decisions. A lot of people sort of sit back, and I thought I was going to do something about it.
Yeah.
And so I decided I would run for city council, and I was 26 at the time.
Wow.
At the time, I was the youngest person to run. I don't know if there's been a few younger than me since then, but I was working at the radio station, and I took a leave of absence and decided, might as well try and see if I can make a difference. And that's how I first got into it. And I was fortunate my first time out to be successfully elected in Ward 5 at the time. Things have changed so much since back then in 1991.
Yeah.
And that's how it all started. And I just sort of, carried on until I decided one day to run for mayor. And that worked out too. So that was good.
So 19 years, starting when you were 26 and then 10 years as a mayor, which was 3 terms. And back in your first 2 terms was when we had 3-year terms.
That's correct.
And your third term was the first year that we went to 4-year terms in Ontario.
That's right. And, if you think about it, way, way back when the terms used to be a year, like every year you'd have elections. And, it's kind of a crazy thing to think about that now, because a lot of the initiatives that you want to undertake will be 2, 3, 4 years and maybe even beyond. When I think of some of the things that we did in the city, it took a lot of my time when I was a councillor, when I was deputy mayor and mayor, to see those things through. So a lot of changes, I think, for the good that way, and making the terms a little bit longer.
Yeah. What did your family think when you told them at 26 you were going to run for politics?
It's almost like you were a fly on the wall to ask me that question, Michael, because I still remember going home and sitting my mom and dad down in the living room. And I said, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to run for city council. And my parents just kind of both looked at me, and I think they thought I person, alien coming down with 10 heads, and how did you take over my daughter kind of thing, because it was just totally unforeseen for me to go down a path like that. And they thought I was a little bit crazy, especially the leaving the job part. But if you're going to go for it, you might as well go for it. And, once we got past that and, they saw all the hard work, my mom and dad did an incredible amount of work. My dad was out delivering flyers every day and probably delivered more flyers on his own than any other person. He had just retired from his job, and he was still a little bit young, and he just started doing all of that. And me and him were putting up signs, and it was just a real more of a family and friends. I didn't have a lot of outside supporters because nobody kind of knew me. Yeah. And, and it was like, how much money can you invest? Because no one's giving you donations back then. So it was quite a commitment. But like I said, we were really successful first time out. So I felt really honored that way.
That's amazing. And to get that support from your family, obviously there's a bit of shock when the first news announcement is made, but then for them to throw in their support like that is really amazing. And I think that as I go through this journey that I'm on, interviewing and getting to know mayors, that's what I'm finding, is that mayors are so unique and have such interesting personalities. So much of it is coming from home, from that support at home and family, that gives them the confidence and that growth mindset to be able to take on these challenges, win, lose, or draw. Well, no draw, but win or lose. And then obviously as a councillor, well, how many councillors could be elected in Ward 5?
So back then we had 2 councillors per ward. It was a little bit different. So, and one of those individuals that was currently an incumbent decided to run for a different office. So there was 1 seat open, and the other person that was elected had been there a long time. And so I was kind of the newcomer, and really a newcomer, because I think that in my recollection, there were a number of the other candidates that had been running over and over again. And they really thought, okay, now that there's an open seat, this was their opportunity. And here I come along. no real experience, but, ran a really great campaign with the help and support of a lot of really amazing people.
Mm-hmm.
And we worked our butts off. Like I still remember every campaign like it was yesterday.
Wow.
And, when you run citywide and it's a funny thing because I ran 2 terms for councillor and was successful. And then I decided to run citywide. And back then we had board of control. Mm-hmm. And when I did that, I remember saying to my mom and dad, well, I'm making another change. And they didn't kind of look at me the same way. They said, okay, well, what are you going to do this time? And I said, well, I'm going to run for board of control. So there's 4 seats. So surely I'm going to get one of them, but I'm going for the top gun. And so they sort of jumped in, same as before, and successful in becoming deputy mayor. And no one ever asked me again if I was a little bit crazy when I decided to run for mayor. I think they kind of knew I was going for it and had a good plan for it, I guess.
That natural progression. Now, that first election night, what were the nerves like? What were the emotions? I'm assuming you were with your folks and seeing returns come in, or how did that play out, and what was the emotional roller coaster?
Well, back then we had a headquarters. That was one thing that, not everybody used to do running for a council seat, but I picked a location in a strip mall that's really close to where I lived and kind of in the heart of that district. Yeah. And we had like a TV set up. Like there was nothing high tech, trust me, but we had a TV set up and all the volunteers were there and we watched the results coming in together. And once we knew we were successful, like it was right out the gate, we knew we were going to be successful. And back then they used to gather at Centennial Hall and all the media was there. And as candidates were successful in winning, they would come down there with their team. So
cool.
It was very cool. So, when I look at the photographs and some of the fun, pictures of being down at Centennial Hall and all of our volunteers come down with their signs and you're walking in and it's just like, it's an incredible thing. It's much nicer to know right out of the gate that you're winning. I had, a couple of mayoral campaigns where, we had to wait a little while to realize that the trend was successful and that we were going to be okay. But those nerves were a little bit different than the first time out.
Yeah. And when the mayor campaign, obviously it's you win or lose.
Right.
It's really all out there.
There's nothing else you can do then.
Yeah. Now, and then going to the mayor, stepping up to the deputy mayor first, the board of control, and then the mayor's role. What kind of like mindset shifts were you undergoing then? Was it sort of all the kind of a natural progression for you, and it just like kind of following these steps along, and well, this is just the way I'm going to do it, and it just seems to fall into place.
So the first campaign I ran for mayor, there were lots of candidates, but there were no other real contenders, I'm going to say. So, we won about, 98% of the vote. Like I was like 50 or 60,000. The next person was like 2,000. But my thought around that anyway was that we were going to run a full out campaign regardless, because it wasn't going to be my only time running. And I wanted people to know that I took the job seriously and I would have won no matter what I did, because there was nobody else running that really was doing anything. But I knew it was a good foundation because I would run at least one more term and who knows how many others after that. So we went out every day, same thing. And, my strategy never changed from any of the elections. We ran full out for 2.5 months. The elections near the end were earlier, but in the beginning, they were like mid-November. So, it was sleet and snow and it was cold. And it was, you talk about a real commitment by volunteers, because you can't do this without them. And we always had people that were willing to help. So, the strategy was kind of the same. You just had to like make it bigger and amplify and try to get more people on board, and obviously a lot more money. It's a big difference spending $10,000 to spending over $100,000. And where does that come from? And how do you do all of that? And that in itself, you really rely on a lot of great people to help and support you.
Yeah. What was maybe one of your biggest challenges that there was a vision that you had, and maybe you shared it in your election campaign, your platform, or maybe it came along during your period as mayor, that really challenged you to convey a vision and something to your council and staff and the public that you were able to share and see some success on?
So there were a few things for me that really stood out. The economy in every election was highlighted for my vision anyway, because I always felt that no matter what you wanted to do in a community, if your economy wasn't strong and if people weren't working and if people didn't feel like, there was that same dream my parents had that could inspire them, then it would be difficult to do any of the projects that you wanted to do. And during my time, we did hit one of those recession, couple of years where, our taxes were higher than people would like, but there weren't a lot of options if we wanted to keep making investments. And, if you wanted to invest, and, this is what I sort of did when I ended my career. I remember my husband, Tim, and we were driving around the city looking at everything that I had a hand in to say, you know what, you did your job. It was 19 years and you could put a finger on every single one of the projects. So whether it was all of the downtown projects. Back then it was called the John Labatt Center. Now it's Budweiser Gardens. But to me, it was one of the turning points for our community, and was took a number of years, and it took 2 terms of council. And I was deputy mayor when we started, and I was mayor when we finished it. All of the downtown renovations. And if you go down into the communities where you see new recreational facilities and arenas and swimming pools and all that, I mean, those are things your neighborhoods are built on. And then even going to the outlining areas and seeing all the new industrial parks, it made me feel like people got it. And that's why they, allowed me all those years to be able to continue doing the work that I did, to try to make a difference in our community.
Yeah. I had a 31-year career as a landscape architect, recently retired. And I as I drive through some of the towns and cities where I had projects, and you kind of forget about some of the things that we've built. And I look back on that legacy as well, and most of those projects people are still using them exactly the way they were designed, exactly the way they were constructed, and it's a testament, I think, to the collaboration that we have in building our cities and towns, where people are hired like myself, and I come in and work with the mayor and council and the staff, and then we tender a project and get it built out, and then the city can enjoy it, the citizens can enjoy it and animate it, and it's a really successful legacy. But then there's other legacies as well, like the task force to end women abuse, which is not a built project, but in itself with policy and with practice and putting into practice and tools and things that people can take advantage of is equally, if not more important, because they're so important to people, especially in sensitive situations. So can you tell us a little bit about that, the transition from, that kind of once the hard legacy or built legacy to the soft legacy?
Yeah, it's, and it's a great thing to point that out as an example, because the amount of work that it took, and I was more the vehicle. When you're in the mayor's seat, you have the opportunity to be able to speak for those that can't speak for themselves. And in this case, we have still today many amazing agencies in our community that deal with those issues as a front line. But what was happening is that it wasn't getting through to areas where we needed others to step up. And what our target really was to try to get our message out through the business community, so that people working in the corporate sector could also know that there were options for people having to deal with violence, and also what is the corporate responsibility to make it safe for people to step forward and get the support that they need. And so all those agencies, pulling them all together under the mayor's umbrella, gave us the chance to be able to speak loudly to a sector of our community that isn't typically the one that jumps up and speaks about it. And we had a lot of really great corporate partners that stepped forward to be able to help us put posters up in their organizations and get the message out to their employees. And we certainly did the same thing all through City Hall, trying to use it as the example. And I had a really amazing city manager at the time, Jeff Fielding, who really took this responsibility as well for all of the people that worked at City Hall and said, we're going to do our part to show by example. And so, when those groups all came together and we did that for all those years, I think it was the first time that we could move something so important to our community into another venue that was really going to help make London as safe as it possibly can. And I'm still really proud of that work. And I know that task force long out, I guess it was just after I left, sort of disbanded. They didn't carry it on. But I think for those years that we had it, it did some good work.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Wonderful legacy to leave as well. One of the areas that I was interested in is obviously sustainability and stewardship. And I'm wondering about the New Deal for sustainable funding for cities. A little bit of detail around that. And did that involve a lot of collaboration with all across Canada? And or could you kind of focus a bit more on your own backyard in London? And
Yeah. It shows you the power of people working together across a whole country to make a difference so that it can individually affect communities in a positive way. And back in that day, we knew we didn't have a source of sustainable funding for municipalities to do all the work that they needed to do from an infrastructure perspective. And yet, pipes were bursting and bus fleets were, aging and, you couldn't do all the things that you wanted to do. And the only way that we knew we could manage that in a better way was to try to get some of the money that we spend in all of our communities every time you put gas in the car or in the truck or wherever you're putting it in, and their taxes with that. And so we felt that it was only fair that each of us would get our per capita share, whatever that percentage was. And so it took the work of our big city mayors caucus, of which I represented London, and these were, the biggest cities in the country, working with the federal government and working with our provincial governments individually as well to make sure that we could get a share of that. So it started at the federal level, and then we also were successful at a provincial level as well. And they still ride the benefit of that today. And it's obviously increased because more and more gas is more expensive now than it was back then. But it was multi-millions of dollars every year on the bottom line, and really important. Each year it would fluctuate, just depended how much gas we were using. Like I imagine a year this year where most of us are working remotely at home, that number might be smaller come the end of the year if people aren't, using as much gas and what have you. But an incredible program that was very successful. And again, something that we worked on collaboratively across the country.
Well, and every single community benefited.
Absolutely. And
every single person in Canada. And
that's right.
Yeah.
But we all drive, or most of us do, right? And if you're not, you're taking the bus. And so the federal infrastructure money gave us the ability to use it for anything infrastructure related. And the provincial piece helped us with our transit, projects and things. So, we had the benefit of both worlds, even regardless of how you get yourself around. That was a really important opportunity for our budgets to get enhanced that way.
Yeah. Now, London is called the Forest City?
Yes.
Forest City. And I remember that from playing coaching volleyball. Forest City Volleyball Club always had some of the best teams in Ontario and Canada. I'm just thinking back now in your 19 years, were parks and recreation one of your special areas of interest, and is there a special a favorite project that you recall that you really enjoyed working on?
Well, that's a good question too, because it's all part of the pie, right? When you're trying to build a community and what the strength is of a neighborhood. And, on the one hand, you want people to be working and getting jobs. And that helps bring in revenue because people are feeling confident and they're spending money and investing money. And so, we have taxes, of course, and then how you reinvest that back. And, rather than saying, hey, this one park was most important to me, I can say that what we actually did was to say that sort of neighborhood infrastructure, and it could be a green space, it could be a park, it could be, playground equipment in a particular area that, is underserviced. It could be an arena, a pool, a gym, whatever it is. It was kind of the pie that we were trying to say, this has to be a strong portion of that. So if you're going to cut it up and say we're going to do a bunch of things, this has to be one of the priorities, because people, and accessibility, that was the other part, is how do you make any of those things accessible for people that might have different needs, whether it's physical or what have you. And so you'll find, if you were driving around London again, that a lot of the investments we made then and still make today carries on that whole strategic vision of building strength, not just in one sector, but making sure your community and your neighborhoods as a whole are strong. And if they are strong for children and for youth and for families, then it makes it strong for everybody. And it gives people alternatives to getting into trouble. Like I remember, even arguing when we were talking about police budgets and how much we invest in police budgets. If we could make our neighborhoods strong and give our young people and our youth and children strong alternatives to not doing anything, then you're less likely to have as many policing needs as you might otherwise. And so, there were lots of good reasons to do the things that we did. Yeah,
and so often we kind of forget about that. It's we're dealing with the immediate issue, not just a symptom. And I remember we did a project in Brooklyn, Ontario, and they wanted to put a new park shelter in, and we were able to find a recycled timber frame structure that was just beautiful carpentry and beautiful Western red cedar. And one of the councillors said, "Well, are the kids going to come and vandalize it, spray graffiti on it?" Because it was one of the places where the kids like to hang out and at night and be a little bit mischievous. And what we found was, because that park space and that piece of structure was so beautiful, that they really respected it, and they started to take ownership of it. They started to protect it. And it's amazing that then the police notice it, our security services notice it, and it's so important at the grassroots level that we do provide for that, and really look at quality space and public realm.
Yeah, ownership is exactly the word that always comes to mind for me, because, a lot of the times when you're building and investing in neighborhoods, you are asking the neighborhood to tell you what they need. And if they tell you what they need and you respond, then, as you say, not only is that respected, but it's kind of protected. Like if someone's going out there to try to vandalize something, they will hold you accountable for it, because everything costs money. And if you're willing to go the distance, I remember one park in particular in the Kipps Lane area, we built this whole parking, our whole playground structure and all kinds of things. But we talked to the young people there and said, what do you need here? Like, what is of interest? What's going to keep you coming back here in a safe way? And didn't matter what age you were. And newborns and little kids with their moms would be just as easily to come as some of the older people. And it was a huge success. And I think still today is a really important part of what builds that community and pulls them together.
Yeah, that's so important. Explain to us a little bit the transition from mayor, being at the pinnacle of municipal government, and the kind of the head coach, the leader, the top dog at the city, and then transitioning then into the rest of your career and life. And can you explain a little bit about the emotions that you went through with that, and then those next steps? And that's really exciting. I think what you're doing now, it's so valuable.
I do love what I'm still doing today, but I'd be lying if I didn't say that it was a transition for sure, because you do exactly as you described it. You sort of, everything is on your shoulders. So from one perspective, everything is there. And I still remember, I tell this story, and maybe some of your listeners, if they've heard me talk, they've heard this before, but I remember in my final few weeks after that election, and I was in my office cleaning up and stuff like that, because I had about 5 weeks before I was transitioning out. And my executive assistant one day said to me, I think the phones don't work. And I said, what do you mean the phones don't work? And she said, well, the phone hasn't rung in, like in days. And I said, well, it's not because the phones don't work. It's like, I'm on my way out. So, there's no point in calling me, because there's probably not much I can do to help too many people anymore. But the weight was lifted off my shoulders in a way that I didn't realize how much I was carrying all those years. Every responsibility, every action, every item, whether it had anything to do with me or council or not, it was always the mayor who's responsible. And so, I carried that for such a long time, for all those years, that all of a sudden it's a real weight off. And so, and I remember my mom saying, you know what, you did your part, you gave enough. It's time for you to do something else for yourself. And when I got the job at Fanshawe, I was really excited to go back there. I was still going to be able to use my connections and my experience in the political realm to help the college thrive and those kinds of things. But I remember more than once someone saying to me, you have to get this approved by this person, and this person, rather than me just like sort of moving along thinking and reminding myself, what, there's a different process here. Like, you're not this person anymore, you're this person. So, it took me a little bit of time to sort of step back a little bit to say, okay, you got to get with the game and it's fine. I mean, and the longer you're there anyway, the more people trust you anyway. And they kind of know that if you're saying something, it's probably a good idea to take the advice, or, to hear it out with kind of an open mind, whereas maybe in the past that might not have happened. But, I spent a lot of years learning and watching and hearing and seeing what works and doesn't. And so, I've been there over 10 years now. And after all this time, there's a lot of respect and, confidence goes back and forth between myself and the president and the VPs and other people. And so, but it was a transition, no word of a lie. And, my other hat as a professor at Brescia, being able to take the experience and kind of impart that and try to inspire young women to realize that they could have also a career in politics or other type of community building. It doesn't always have to be, top dog as the mayor of the community. It could be something else that helps build a city, and to know that those opportunities are there and available to them is a great thing to be able to see.
Yeah. Are the women now enrolled in Brescia, or the people you're dealing with at Fanshawe? Are you finding that we're getting more women interested in politics that are asking you about, like, what's my next step, or what should I be studying, or how should I be preparing myself?
Yeah. And, and sometimes I think what people realize too is that not everybody is cut out for this. Even if you think from a distance, this is what you want to do. When you realize the reality of it, and some of these, programs that I teach in, help people understand that leadership is about a lot of different things, and you got to find the fit for you. So it could be as a volunteer, it could be the not-for-profit section, it could be the corporate section, or it very well could be in politics. But, in a respectful way, not everybody is cut out for this. It takes a toll, on a personal life, and you give up a lot, you get a lot. But it's not for everybody, and not everybody goes in knowing that or realizing that. And so I often, will challenge people when they come to me and say, I'm going to run for, and I'd say, but like, why? What's your motivation? What do you want to get out of it? And what are you hoping to do? Because you don't just all of a sudden go there and change the world. Like, I sometimes see things that are happening now and I say, yeah, we talked about that 10 years ago. We talked about that 20 years ago. I've been gone 10, I was there 19. Everything that's old is new again. Like it's, and so, there's a lot of things that come with this that are phenomenal, but you also have to be realistic when you're moving into a role like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, 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 very sound advice. And you're exactly right. It's in every role. It's such a personal journey, and sometimes we're just not cut out for it. And just lastly, today's media is just so different than it was in the old days. And some of the, coming from small towns, the local blogs that we have now, people that are so they're very well spoken, they're very well researched, they can get their point of view across so eloquently and so broadly through social media. And with a reduction in local newspapers now and things like that, that must be a real challenge too, I think, sometimes for politicians, especially mayors, is to balance that input, that information, and try to like put it into context. And especially if it starts to get a little personal, I would think.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's a whole different world with media. But, at the time when I was involved, there was a lot more media around, more radio stations. Newspaper had more reporters. They were always covering City Hall. And so we were always under scrutiny, but nowadays it's even a step beyond that, right? You've got all the social media world, and it's hard to debate or keep track or keep up with what everybody is saying out there, and whether it's true or not true, or small bites and things like that. It is a completely different world for sure.
Yeah.
But we also had our challenges back then, and I think because I come from a media background, my being able to manage it was maybe a little bit easier than some people, not all, but then for some, because I kind of always knew what the media needed and what the best practices would be and how to build those relationships from the get-go. And, I always used to say, not only to my students, but other people around City Hall and whatever, is that, when the media are calling for something, you may not always know or have the answer, and you don't have to always respond on the spot, but you do need to respond. And when you build the trust and the relationship that is there with them, you're at least more apt to get, an objective, perspective than them just going off. Because sometimes on social media, that's what you find, is that people are off in another world. And that was just, as I left, it was just starting to come in. So I didn't have to deal with that as much, but sometimes I even still today, I see people throwing my name out there and I go, like, I've been gone 10 years. Like, what are you writing something on Twitter about? Like, I'm not even making decisions anymore. Like, and so, it's just too easy for people to throw things out there. And they're like, yeah, that DeCicco-Best and, person and whatever. And I'm like, I've been gone. Like, you got to move on, get over it. And, but that's what happens.
Just like the built projects and the End Women's Abuse Project, there's this other legacy, those legacies, and then there's the social media legacy that's going to go on forever and ever and ever. Well, Anne Marie, thank you very much for your wonderful stories and words of wisdom and participation on the show today. Really, really appreciate it. It's a great, great honor to have you on the Thriving Mayor Show, and really want to wish you and your family a amazingly abundant new year in 2021, and all the success and joy possible.
Well, it's been a real pleasure, Michael. And, again, for all those out there that are looking for hope and inspiration in 2021 for better days, I join you in, there you go, hope. I join you in sending out those positive thoughts, and let's just hope our world is in a better place next year.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So we'll be back next week with another guest on the Thriving Mayor Show. Please like us and comment on social media. We're obviously going to be on Facebook and YouTube, trying to get onto LinkedIn Live as well in the new year. So that's one of my next challenges. Thanks again, Anne Marie, and Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Thriving Mayor Show. Make sure to like and share and tell your friends and colleagues. Mayors are awesome and are the change agents to enhance the quality of living for over 80% of us. Remember what Coach Wooden said, you cannot live a perfect day without doing something for someone who can never repay you. Much love and peace. Until next time.